We must stop thinking. If we ever have any hopes of strengthening our connection with the divine. Now, when I am speaking passionately at length about things, I'm not thinking. And what this means is I'm more just completely open to whatever comes out of my mouth next. When you're thinking, you're plotting your course, you know exactly what you're going to say. And if somebody cuts you off, you can re-say it essentially when the time comes, or you can at least remember or know what you were going to say. But when you're not thinking, when you're just allowing your thoughts, when you're just emptying yourself and letting the divine spark within you speak through you, you don't know what's going to come out of your mouth next. You can't predict it. If you get cut off in the middle of it, it's like the divine train was stopped. You don't know what was going to come next. You can't predict. You have no idea. And I think we need to really stop thinking. I think it's far better to conversate, to quote unquote think when we are doing this. And it's a slippery slope, obviously talking about thinking and thoughts and in a certain way what I'm saying not to do, think, you have to do. But it's a different type of thinking. It's not the thinking where we are applying our knowledge, our rational lens. It's the thinking where we are completely letting go, completely giving ourselves over to the moment, just saying that which feels right. Just letting it bubble up in us, come out, and after realizing we don't even really know what we just said. We don't even really know the point that we were trying to make. All we know is that we made our point and it came across very clearly. And it was like nothing that we could have ever have done. And I think, the Bible is very telling. I think a lot of the divine wisdom that I've stumbled upon, there's always like a little, I can always tie it back to something in the Bible. This is kind of like goes back to almost the idea of speaking in tongue, even though I'm not like blabbering gibberish, or I'm not able to say something and have everybody hear me and understand me. But it's almost like that. It's almost, if you view the Bible metaphorically, it almost is like that. It's almost like I'm saying, as long as you know English, the things that you say when you're in this state, they resonate with everybody. They resonate with something deep within us. I was thinking yesterday about how most people aren't wise. Most people are very foolish, actually. But somehow, when you look up like good quotes, you never really see a quote that's not wise. You never really see a quote that's doesn't have any merit. You never really hear anybody talk about bad quotes. And I was thinking about that, and I was like, I think that's because something inside of us just knows. Maybe maybe we're not able to understand it, but why we think this quote's good, maybe we're not able to articulate it, but somewhere within each and every one of us, when we hear words put in a certain way that connect with us eternally, we just know. Even though most people aren't wise, all the quotes like ever. And like when I mean, when I'm talking about that, obviously anything can become a quote, but the quotes that are famous, the timeless wisdom, the things that have been told for generations and generations. People are foolish, but somehow, some way, these quotes, these maxims, these things are so divine, so wise, and there's so much merit to all of them. And I think that's because something inside of us can hear the divinity that that person was speaking with. They were speaking in a tongue that connected to our soul, and that's because they completely emptied themselves and they let you know the Holy Spirit speak through them, for the Bible term. I think there's merit to that. A lot of videos I make, I could, after the fact, I don't really even know what I said. All I know is that I said something that I know to be valuable, know to be divine truth, or at least working my way towards it. At least valuable in the sense that it can allow someone to go down a thought rabbit hole in that area and come up with something even more fruitful. But it's when we're thinking, it's when we're trying to impose our will, sound profound, that our points never get across. You could, it's just trusting in that, because all the way you articulate something is going to hit everybody differently. And we really have no idea how, if we say, if you have two options, which one's gonna affect the person more. Maybe one of the options is articulated better, but maybe one of the other options, or maybe the other option has like a word, like a key word, or something that really resonates with the person. And if you're thinking, you may say this option, but if you're just allowing thoughts to come out, if you're just empty and you're just letting something speak through you, then you may understand that this option will be better suited for this person, or for this audience, or for whatever the situation. And that's why I think we need to stop thinking. We need to let thoughts take over. We need to just become empty, which is, another Bible thing. It talks about being empty, or like make yourself empty, because then it's easier to be filled with, the good stuff. Empty yourself and it's easier to change. And there's also truth in that too. And there's many truths in many religious texts. Many, many, many truths. And that's why I've read many religious texts, because in old books in general, because there's so much divine wisdom, especially in the ancient world. They were they were more focused on it. They had more faith that the truths of the universe could be discovered in, conversations. They had more wisdom, truly. So, to me, I think people think we're so much smarter than people 2,000 years ago, but I don't think so. I think in many ways we're not as smart. In other ways, maybe we're smarter. But I say overall, people from 2,000 years ago, if you drop them into today's world, sure, it'd take a while for them to adapt. But if you drop them in as a kid, or as like a young, like they already have some habits formed, like say like 12, I think they could really, they would be very smart. But that's beside the point. Just stop thinking so much. It's not helping you. I heard once the idea that we think ourselves out of being happy so often. And that's so true. We think ourselves out of our purpose. We think ourselves out of the things that we're meant to be doing. We think ourselves out of so many things. And that's why I'm bullish on intuition, on thoughts, on feelings, and thinking, rationality, and things of that nature. I'm kind of just almost convinced the ego is just corrupted it at all. And if we really want to be in touch with the divine spark within, we need to move away from this into the intuition, to feelings. We need to feel more and think less. We can feel far more than we can think. It's a shame for someone who doesn't want to feel anymore, because life is meant to be felt. Why else live if you can't feel? Feel deeply. And I think, you will have, you will have lows and you will have ups. Monks believe the goal of life is to walk this even plane with no ups and no downs, so that you can just stay even. But I think that's horrible. That's no way I would want to live. And I've come to this conclusion somewhat recently because there's so much to learn in our depths. And the heights, I mean, they're the heights. Why would you want to live? Why would you want to live without experience a height? And I mean like a natural height, not a like an ecstasy height, but like a fulfilling your purpose height, things of that nature. And the trick is to understand how to deal with both, how to be in a depth and not give into despair and learn the lessons the depth is trying to teach you, and then how to be at a height and not make stupid decisions, not imagine it's going to last forever, not trick yourself into thinking that this is the norm. It's we need to spend more time learning how to deal with depths and heights instead of attempting to find this even keel when that's not even desirable. Is, in my opinion, life's meant to be felt. I want to feel deeply. I want to be in the depths and I want to be at the heights. And we also need to understand that the peak is only beautiful because of the valley below. And there is only a peak because of the valley. And the valley is also beautiful in its own way because you're staring up at monstrous peaks that are just begging to be climbed, that are begging to be summited, and nothing is stopping you other than time. And you just have faith and give it time, and soon enough you'll be on that peak staring at the valley where you once were. But you also have to realize at that peak that soon you'll be in that valley staring up at where you once were. And you have to realize the former is no better than the latter, and the latter no better than the former. They're both meaningful because they both happen. It's like you can't have good without evil. Therefore, we should be grateful to evil because we couldn't have anything good without it. And